And Senator Flake is with us now. Senator, thank you for coming on the show, and give us your reaction to what the president did yesterday.
Well, I think that it was an appropriate response. I'm glad that he took action quickly, and we'll see where we go from here. But I thought that last night's action was completely appropriate.
So what, it's funny to see what people on the other side of the aisle are saying about this, but aside from the politics here, there is a lot happening in the future of that part of the world with what's happening there, with Russia's involvement and what they've been doing. Any idea of what happens next, or is this really dependent on what Bashar Assad does next?
Well, it does, and also Vladimir Putin. I hope that this changes the calculus for Assad, obviously. Anybody who watched that tape of those kids battling chemical warfare had to be impacted by it. I think the whole world was. And also for the Russians to prop up that regime, given what they're doing, not including the promises that Russia made, as well as Assad, with regard to the disposal of those chemical weapons that we know now is completely false.
Yeah, we read the tweet. John Kerry tweeted out when he was Secretary of State back in 2014 that the last 8% of the chemical weapons that were in Syria have been destroyed, and he thanked everybody for their hard work. And that's now proven that either they got more after those were destroyed, but the willingness to use weapons like this on your own people, you could see a shift in President Trump's attitude and face. He seemed to be emotionally disturbed in a way, by the visual of those children suffering like they did.
You're right. He not only saw it, but he voiced it. He said himself that he's changed his mind here. And if you remember his comments from 2013, when Syria crossed that red line, he has come full circle. I'm glad he has, because nobody ought to countenance what's happening there. The destabilization that's happening in Syria affects not just Syria. It affects Europe. It affects us. And to have terrorist organizations like ISIS operating in Syria with chemical weapons around that they could easily come upon and utilize, that's a situation that we simply can't have.
Tim Kaine tweeted out yesterday that this was unconstitutional because he didn't consult Congress. Can you clear up for everybody the constitutionality of what the president did, and when is the president required to come to Congress with an act of war?
Well, nobody's been stronger than Tim Kaine and myself, frankly, on asking the president and asking Congress to authorize military action with regard to ISIS. I don't think our 2001 AUMF, or authorization for use of force, fits very well given the current situation. Having said that, the president has Article 2 authority to go ahead and take this kind of action. Under the War Powers Act, now he has 60 days to come to Congress and say, all right, here's step 2, step 3, if there is a step 2 and a step 3. But he certainly has Article 2 authority to take a strike like this, given the situation and the threats to our own national security.
Okay, on a separate topic, on the Neil Gorsuch nomination and the nuclear option that was happened yesterday in the Senate. How do you feel about the nuclear action, and how do you feel about it now with Neil Gorsuch? How quickly will he be confirmed?
Well, we'll have the vote at 11:30, and it will take about 15 minutes. I'm not happy that we had to pull the nuclear option for the last of the president's executive calendar. It doesn't speak very well for the Senate that we can't change behavior and that we have to change the rules. Having said that, what we've done is basically return the Senate to the status quo, where prior to 2003, nobody ever filibustered the Supreme Court nominees. You just didn't do it, or any of the president's executive calendar. So now we've made de jure what was de facto. And so that won't change much. It's whether or not it spreads, and if people want to change the legislative filibuster and change the very nature of the Senate, and that would not be good. So I'm not happy about what we had to do yesterday, but I don't think we had a choice. If you can't confirm Neil Gorsuch, a mainstream nominee like Neil Gorsuch, then I just don't think we can confirm anybody.
I absolutely agree with you. I appreciate the time as always. I know that we set this up, well, it's not that early for you there, but I'm sure it was a long night. So always, we thank you for your time. We hope to see you when you're back in Arizona.
Hey, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Senator.